Welcome to Artist Talk, where we are reconnecting with transcendent heroes at borders to update what these incredible activists are doing during this COVID pandemic. Nalleli Cobo was 9 years old when she first became involved with activism. Her journey began when she noticed that she was often ill, as well as the community around her. It turned out that an oil drilling company, Alanco, had been leaking toxins into the neighborhood for years. Since then, Cobo has been active creating a movement called People Not Pozos to fight against Allen Company. They were able to temporarily force them to close the doors in 2013. Most unfortunately, since January of this year, she has been battling cancer. Please join me for this inspiring conversation with our transcendent hero, Nalleli Cobo. Today we're with Nalleli Cobo, and we are so honored to have this chance to have a talk with you. So we met at the reception for Transcendent Heroes at Borders. So since that time, you were unfortunately told that you had cancer. If you don't mind, I wanted to follow up on how you're doing these days.
Yeah, of course. I was diagnosed with cancer on January 15th of this year, 2020. I've had 3 surgeries, 30 days of radiation, and I'm currently on my last round of chemo. So 3 rounds of chemo total. Like lost my hair and stuff, but I'm still trying to see the positive in everything. Like, okay, I have cancer, but now I'm diagnosed, and fortunately, we caught it early, even though my cancer is stage 1 because it's such a rare and such an aggressive kind of cancer. It got my entire reproductive system. I had to have a radical hysterectomy at the age of 19. Like, I've always dreamed of being pregnant and having that experience, and that's something that was robbed of me because the doctors didn't pay attention to me when I would go in for visits because they said the odds of me having something so serious was 1 in a million.
I just admire you as being so brave all the time. And I would like to get your thoughts if you think you could attribute this cancer to the environmental toxins that you were exposed to.
It's something that we're not able to prove. I personally do believe that it is from them, as there are signs in front of the gate that says toxic chemical cause cancer, birth defects, and reproductive harm, but there's no test for me to be able to prove it.
One cannot help to think that there's a correlation, right? I'm wondering if you could talk to us about your early experience at 9. You started to experience serious nosebleeds.
I grew up 30 feet across the street from an oil well. They were exposing toxic emissions that made not only me, but the rest of my community sick. And at the age of 9, I realized what was going on and that we as people have the power to create change within our community. So I started going door to door knocking with my mom, going to town hall meetings, city hall hearings, speaking at public comments during those hearings to let people know what was going on in our very own backyards. And I got really sick. I got body spasms that got to the point where I couldn't walk. I have asthma. That's something I'm always going to have to live with now. Heart palpitations, and I had to use a heart monitor for several weeks. Nosebleeds so severe, so intense, I couldn't sleep horizontally. I had to sleep sitting down because that way I wouldn't choke on my own blood at night. And it wasn't just my reality, but the reality of my entire community. And that's when we realized we had to turn ourselves from victims to activists and to fighters, and we created change within our community by starting that grassroots campaign called People Not Pozos, People Not Wells. And because of our work, Alanco has been temporarily shut down for going on 7 years now this November.
So that whole movement did take time to get going, or I'm sure you're always spoken as one of the leaders to make that happen. What was that process, the activism process?
It definitely took time. It took 3 to 4 years, I believe, to really get that momentum going and get media to listen to us or elected officials to listen to us. But everything takes time and change does come slowly, and you can't let that time frame stop you from being positive and pushing towards the change that you want to create. We were very fortunate to have change occur within 3, 4 years, and there's are some communities that have been fighting for more, and they're still trying to get that momentum. But that's when we need to support one another and say, okay, I've done this. This is what helped us. how can we uplift each other's voices.
So since then, I know you've moved out of the neighborhood, but you still go back to the neighborhood and reconnect with the people. Oh, that's so good of you. So I hear that actually Allen Company has not lived up to all that they're supposed to, that there's still leaks in the wells. Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
And then you're in another organization called Stand LA. They are trying to pass legislation to stop oil refineries near neighborhoods. So how is that going these days? Or what's happening with that?
It's been a really drastic change. It's now a state bill to get that 2,500-foot health and safety buffer zone passed in the state of California, which is crazy. I remember when we were first talking about doing the studies to see what the buffer zone should be and where people wouldn't be impacted with their health anymore. And now it's calling your state senators to have them vote yes on this bill. And it's just so empowering to know that our communities are creating this change. We are the frontline communities that have gone through this, that have suffered the symptoms, that have lived day to day through this, that have lived through the toxins and toxic emissions and exposures to these chemicals. And now we're the ones implementing that statewide bill. It's amazing.
Yeah, no. Oh my gosh, that is just amazing. That is just awesome that you're doing all that and that, this is a movement. So talking about movements, so I feel like during COVID, environmental racism has become a term that is very much on people's minds and talking about. Interested to hear what you think of that phenomenon happening during this COVID pandemic.
I think environmental racism wasn't ever really thought of before COVID-19. And it's like bittersweet, I guess. It's finally raising awareness to the environmental racism that has gone on for decades.
Hmm.
And people are finally realizing that environmental racism is a thing.
Hmm.
Also, so sad that it had to take a global pandemic in order for people to realize that it's something so serious. It happens everywhere, and it's something so prominent. Like, oh, it's it's heartbreaking to know that so many people don't necessarily believe something unless they see it. And if they're not the ones firsthand suffering from environmental racism, they kind of just push it away.
It's just a very sad situation, and then when we go into climate change, these issues will become much more apparent. But I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about the cultural makeup of the neighborhood in around Allen Company?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, my community, I would describe it as the most beautiful, hardworking group of people you could think of. It's people that work 12 to 14-hour days to provide a roof over their families and food on the table. It's people that, despite the language barrier, said yes to fighting for change for their children. And something that my mom has always said is that when she came to this country, she never thought she would have to fight an oil well to give us the right to breathe clean air. And that's the
Right.
for so many of these people living in these areas. It's people of color, it's immigrants, it's undocumented people, it's Spanish speaking communities, it's these people that are so hardworking and are still being denied the right to breathe clean air because of our socioeconomic status or our zip code or so many other barriers that people may see us as less than, which shouldn't be a thing. It's the reality that about 580,000 Angelinos live within a quarter of a mile or less to an active oil and gas well, and that's such a drastic number, and that's something that needs to change. And the majority of those Angelinos are people of color. I believe it's 92%.
It's something that needs to change, but we're so thankful for young people like you who are speaking up, and you are definitely, people talk about you because you've really reached a lot of people through your activism, and we're so proud of you. And of course, right now, the time you need to recover from the cancer, but I'm wondering what is your future plans for activism?
Long term or short term?
Okay, short and long.
Uh, Long term, it's definitely I do dream of a time where oil drilling is read about in history books, and I think it was crazy it went on for so long next to people. I also want to be a civil rights lawyer and work for the ACLU, and I want to be a congresswoman, and I run for president in 2036. So
Hey, we're waiting for you. I believe it. I believe you. Actually, I really do. You give me shivers because I really think there's a genuine hope for that. So yeah. And then what's on the short term?
short term, it's definitely getting the statewide 2,500-foot bill passed and going into remission to get back into work fully because I haven't been able to dedicate as much time as I like to my activism due to my cancer treatments and me being in and out of the hospitals and stuff.
Fantastic. We really appreciate your time you've given to us, and I'm almost speechless because I don't know how to thank you enough. But we will keep in touch, and so this is kind of an update that we're trying to do, and stay in touch. And we're so happy to hear from you.
Hey, likewise.
Thank you so much. That was so incredible and moving to hear from Nalleli Cobo and her ongoing activism and challenges. Nalleli is a powerful voice amongst young activists, much like Greta Thunberg. After the interview, I realized I forgot to ask her about her experience meeting the late Congressman John Lewis. She emailed her response, which said, I remember him sharing his story about the civil rights movement and how he still fought to that day. He inspired me to risk arrest for the first time ever. It was truly an honor to meet him and share my work with him. I remember he said, thank you for your work, keep it up. And I was like, no, thank you. Truly a remarkable person who will be remembered forever. May he rest in power. Thank you again, Nalleli, for your participation and time. We are all wishing you a speedy and full recovery so you can return to your brilliant, courageous, and life-changing activism.